Thanks very much for listening to my talk today. I'm going to present some research which has been part of the diploma project, which is a large-scale evaluation of the National Diabetes Prevention Programme in England. In particular today I'm presenting research about which compares the effectiveness of digital and face-to-face methods of delivery of the Diabetes Prevention Programme. The lead author for this work is Antonia Marsden, and I'm presenting today because she's on maternity leave at the moment. This is joint work between a team of us from the diploma project, but we've also worked with colleagues from NHS England, which includes Emma Barron, Ben McGough and Jonathan Valabci, and also a colleague from UCL, Elizabeth Murray. So diabetes prevention programmes are behaviour change interventions where people who are at risk of diabetes are identified, usually in primary care, and referred to a service that has a behaviour change interventions largely around diet and exercise. There's substantial evidence from around the world that these kind of programmes can slow or prevent the progression to diabetes, but most of the evidence so far has been for face-to-face programmes. Now, there is some evidence from elsewhere that digital delivery might be more convenient for some people, might be more attractive for various reasons to some people, and it may have a lower cost per unit delivered. However, there is some evidence that digital delivery can suffer from high rates of attrition and low levels of engagement with the programme. Overall, in terms of diabetes prevention programmes, there's much less evidence supporting digital delivery, and there's no direct comparisons of digital and face-to-face. So when the NHS came to develop a diabetes prevention programme, they've rolled out something which is essentially a face-to-face programme. We started rolling it out in 2015, and there's been a gradual rollout since then until now the whole of England is covered. It's targeted at people who are high risk of type 2 diabetes, and those people are identified usually by a blood test called an HbA1c test in primary care and then referred into the programme. The prevention programme has been set up by NHS England based on international evidence about the best ways to deliver diabetes prevention programmes, and it particularly targets diet and physical activity. This is delivered by four provider organisations who've been commissioned by the NHS, and they have to provide a minimum of 15 face-to-face sessions in groups over 9 months. And from elsewhere in our programme, we know that the introduction of the diabetes prevention programme has been associated with a decrease in type 2 diabetes incidence. Now, the NHS England were interested to see whether a digital programme might be a possibility, but they didn't want to roll that out nationally initially because they didn't think there was enough international evidence of it working. So in 2017 to 18 they had a pilot digital programme which was very similar content to the face-to-face service. It was intended that people would be on the programme for 12 months, and it was delivered by one of 5 providers, some of which were the same as face-to-face but others were different. And there were 2 delivery modes depending on which area of the country it was. One delivery mode was digital only, so this was offered in areas without a face-to-face service, where patients in those areas, the only thing they could be offered was digital. The other alternative was digital choice. That this was often in areas where the face-to-face service was already up and running and people were offered a choice whether they wanted digital or face-to-face. So we set up a research project to evaluate if the digital delivery of the NHS DPP is at least as effective as the face-to-face delivery. And we were able to compare 3 cohorts of people, all of whom were at risk of diabetes. There was a face-to-face cohort, a digital-only cohort, and a digital choice cohort. And I've given there the numbers, and you can see that many more people went through the face-to-face cohort than the other 2. Because the other 2 were pilot programmes. And the outcomes we measured were change in weight and blood glucose, which is called an HbA1c test, from baseline to 6 months, which was the primary outcome, and we also measured 12 months as well. And what we did was we took individuals from the digital pilot and we matched them to similar individuals on the face-to-face programme in terms of age, sex, ethnicity and deprivational quintile. And we did that because we knew that there might be differences between these three cohorts at baseline, and a matching design enabled us to be comparing similar individuals who were going through the programmes. We set up our study as a non-inferiority design. So we wanted to know not whether digital was any better than face-to-face, but whether it was at least as effective as face-to-face. And in doing so, we had to set non-inferiority margins. These are like the clinically important differences that you might adopt in other study designs. And we gathered the information for these both from the literature, but also by consulting with experts in diabetes. So in terms of change in weight for people at risk of diabetes, we felt that the non-inferiority margin, or the clinically important difference, would be 1 kilogram at 6 months and 0.7 kilograms at 12 months. Unfortunately for HbA1c, we weren't able to set non-inferiority margins because widespread opinion seems to be that any change in HbA1c is positive, however small that might be. The data source for our study were individual level patient data collected by the Diabetes Prevention Programme service providers, passed to NHS England and then on to us. We did two different analysis that I'm going to report today. The first one was the analysis on the matched data. We did mixed effects linear regression to compare change in weight and also change in HbA1c from baseline to 6 months and from baseline to 12 months, with 6 months being the primary. And we were looking, comparing that change between face-to-face cohort and each of the two separate digital cohorts. And when we did that analysis, we adjusted for the variables that we'd matched on. We also adjusted for the timing of the measurement in months, because there was some variation on that between individuals. We also adjusted for the geographic area in which the people were attending the programme by adjusting for CCG and STP. And the 95% confidence interval for the adjusted mean difference in change was used to determine non-inferiority, and that may not mean much now, but I think it will become clearer when I present the results later on. And the second analysis we did was using the full cohort, not the match data, but the full cohort, to investigate factors associated with differential change in weight and HbA1c. We were particularly interested in inequalities here, so we did models that included an additional interaction term between the delivery mode and age, sex, ethnicity, deprivation, baseline weight in the case of HbA1c analysis only. I'll start by presenting the baseline characteristics across the three different groups. You can see on all these different variables that we collected that there are some changes, some differences rather, between the groups. For example, there's a higher proportion of males in the digital choice group than the others, and there's a lower proportion of people of white ethnicity in the digital only group compared to the other two groups, and other changes that you can read there. These changes may reflect differences in the attractiveness of the programs to different subgroups, but equally they may also reflect differences in the geographic populations where the different programs took place. And I think these differences justify our decision that we needed to do matching in order that we're comparing across comparable populations. So this slide shows the raw and adjusted weight changes comparing between the three different programs. You'll see that the bottom axis goes from minus 2 kilograms down to -4 kilograms, and that shows weight loss. So we can see from that that all of the programs achieved weight loss from baseline to 6 months or baseline to 12 months. At 6 months, we can see the digital choice group had higher weight loss than the other two groups. And at 12 months, we can see a lot of overlapping confidence intervals there. So there appears to be not a great deal of difference really between all of those, all the three programs in terms of weight loss. Moving on to HbA1c. Again, you'll see from the bottom axis that on all the programs, on average, people lost weight. And you can see that it appears that at 6 months, face-to-face and digital choice have similar amounts of weight loss, and it's a bit more than the digital-only group. But at 12 months, both the digital programs, while they did achieve weight loss, it wasn't as high as on the face-to-face program. But these are the raw results before we do any matching. So I'm going to move on now and look at what happened when we did the match. Here we present the results of our analysis comparing face-to-face with the digital-only service. So this is the people who lived in areas where they had no choice and they were just offered digital. In many ways, that's the purest comparison, I think, between face-to-face and digital, because of that lack of choice that people had. The first thing we can do here is look at the third column along, looking at the difference from face-to-face. And we can see that in terms of weight, at both 6 and 12 months, there were very small differences between face-to-face and digital, actually slightly in favour of digital. A difference at 6 months, for example, of minus 0.284 kilograms. We can look at the confidence intervals for those figures and see that they cross 0, and we can also look at the p-value to conclude that not only were the differences quite small, they also were not statistically significant. If we look at HbA1c, looking at the same column, we can also see that there were very small differences between face-to-face and digital on average. But you'll see there that there's much wider confidence intervals, and although there's confidence intervals and the p-values indicate then that the results are not statistically significant. But the main purpose of our analysis was to look at non-inferiority. And the way we do that, if we look at first of all at weight at 6 months, if we look at the upper end of the confidence interval, that suggests that there could potentially be plausibly be a difference of 0.144 kilograms between face-to-face and digital. And given that that 0.144 is well within the 1 kilogram non-inferiority limit that we set, we can definitely say that weight at 6 months is not inferior in digital compared to face-to-face. Similarly, at 12 months, the upper end of that confidence interval is well within the 0.7 kilogram non-inferiority limit that we set. So we can confidently say that non-inferiority of the digital program has been demonstrated in relation to weight. When we come on to HbA1c, it's slightly more complicated. As you can see there, we've got much smaller numbers there, largely because of a lot of missing data in the face-to-face data set. And as a result of that, we've got quite wide confidence intervals here. And if we look at the upper end of the confidence interval at 6 months, it's 0.9. Now, although we didn't set an inferiority limit, that is, almost 1 millimole per mole difference in HbA1c. So we can't, so non-inferiority may not have been ruled out in that case. And a similar situation at 12 months. So although on HbA1c, on average, there was no the means of the change were very similar in both face-to-face and digital only. We can't definitely say that the HbA1 results were inferior to the face-to-face. And now we move on to similar models that we've done comparing face-to-face with digital choice this time. So the people that were offered a choice of either face-to-face or digital, and they chose digital. If we look at this again, looking at the column that says difference from face-to-face, we can see this time that there's actually a larger difference here of over a kilogram of difference between face-to-face and digital, in favour of digital. And we can see from the 95% confidence intervals, which don't include 0, and from the p-values, that this is a statistically significant difference. So the digital choice was actually superior to face-to-face on average in terms of weight loss. However, I mean, if we look at the same thing on HbA1c, we can see that there were some small differences in HbA1c in the differences column, but those differences were small and non-significant. But if we move on to the non-inferiority, which is the main purpose of the main objective of our analysis, if we look there at the upper end of the confidence interval for weight, at both 6 and 12 months, it's actually a negative value, so it's well within the non-inferiority limits we set of 1 kilogram at 6 months and 0.7 kilograms at 12 months. So we can definitely say on in terms of weight that the digital choice program is definitely not inferior to the face-to-face program, and in fact is superior. But if we look at HbA1c, we can see there that there are quite wide confidence intervals, particularly at 12 months, and the upper end of that is over 1 millimoles per mole, suggesting that non-inferiority may not have been demonstrated there, although it may have been demonstrated at 6 months when the difference is much smaller. Now I'm going to move on to the second of the two analyses we did, which was looking at interactions effects in order to think about any inequalities there might be on these two programs. So looking first at the digital only service and comparing that to face-to-face, women lost more weight on the digital and men lost more on the face-to-face. There was no effect for age. White individuals lost more weight on both programs, both face-to-face and digital, compared to black individuals. But the difference in weight loss between white and black was larger in digital delivery than it was in face-to-face delivery. But I should say that all ethnic subgroups did lose weight on all the programs, and we saw no effect for deprivation on the digital only program. In the digital choice program, we saw no effect for sex. Older age was associated with more weight loss on the digital choice program. And in terms of ethnicity, very similar to digital only, white individuals lost more weight on both programs compared to black and Asian. And the difference in weight loss between white and both black and Asian was larger in digital delivery than in face-to-face delivery. So very similar to digital only, except that this the differences hold for Asian individuals as well as black on the digital choice program. And lastly, on digital choice, individuals in more deprived areas had similar weight loss on both programs, but those from the less deprived areas lost more weight on the digital program compared to the face-to-face program. So then, to summarise our findings, on average, participants lost weight and saw a reduction in their HbA1c whichever of the 3 programs they were on, whether it's face-to-face or one of the 2 digital delivery options. Weight loss via both the digital delivery programs was non-inferior to that via face-to-face delivery, suggesting that you can deliver the same content in alternative ways without a loss of impact in terms of weight. And where patients were offered the choice of digital or face-to-face, those that chose digital had on average better weight loss outcomes compared to the people on the broad face-to-face programme. In terms of HbA1c, we've got quite inconclusive results. The difference in HbA1c were fairly similar in the digital and the face-to-face. However, we were unable really to conclude non-inferiority. And all patient subgroups lost weight on both programs, but some patient subgroups benefited more than others on various programs. So offering digital delivery will benefit some people and not others, which again goes in the direction really that perhaps offering a choice might be the way to go. Thank you so much for listening to the presentation. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to get in touch. I'd love to talk to you. I've added a link here also for our website if you want to find out more about other aspects of diploma research.